Hey, everybody. So before we get to this week's show, two quick things I wanted to mention. I've been asked a few times by friends, faceless people on the internet, hey, what's the best way to support the show? Well, I'll tell you what I always tell them. Share it with a friend or three. Because oddly enough, it's word of mouth that is still the best way to find new ears. Secondly, we really like making this show and jumping into all the videos, the audio, the police documents, trial research. We're kind of nerdy that way. And so if you want to support that, you can join our Patreon. The first tier begins at free, and then it goes from there. I mean, who doesn't like free? There's nearly 400 miles of Arkansas between Siloam Springs in the northwest corner to the city of Blytheville in the northeast corner. It's about as far apart as possible when you're going west to east in northern Arkansas. And right there, almost in the middle, is the town of Calico Rock. Population about 1,000. It's also home to the North Central Unit, one of the larger facilities in the Arkansas State Prison System. It houses 800 inmates. And on Sunday, May 25th, 2025, one of those inmates, number 168541, has had enough. Enough of the rules, enough of the cold and hard cells, working in the kitchen, enough of life in lockup. The heavy, clean-shaven bald guy finds a black pair of pants, a black shirt, and a vest, common prison guard dress, and walks through the gate of the North Central Unit and out into the free world. No more bars, no more kitchen work, no more rules. Undetected and unnoticed.
We are following breaking news right now out of Arkansas, where the manhunt is currently expanding for a convicted killer.
To the manhunt for the former Arkansas police chief and convicted killer who escaped from prison.
Our top story tonight, the intensifying search for the devil in the Ozarks.
Residents told us they had seen prison guards on horseback.
Inmate number 168541 is a fugitive, hiding somewhere in the thick, dense woods of the Ozarks.
One of the challenges that we have for this area is it is very, as you can see, it's very hilly, it's very rocky. There's a lot of places where it's very narrow to get in and it's very narrow to get out.
A convicted killer and rapist named Grant Hardin, known locally as the Devil in the Ozarks, is making a run for freedom. The FBI, Department of Corrections, State Police, Border Patrol, and a host of others give chase.
There has been an ongoing collective effort with multiple agencies, state, federal, local, utilizing any and all resources that we can to track it down.
We're all wired differently. Some of us are wired for good, some of us are wired for bad. But a select few step outside all of society's boundaries. From Cold Open Media, this is Deviant, the hunt for Grant Hardin. Welcome back to Deviant, where we chase the truth into the dark corners of what people are capable of. I'm Andrew Iden. And this week, we're doing a story that's happening now. If you've heard the name Grant Hardin, it's because he's a convicted killer and rapist, and until just a few days ago, was on the run. In fact, we had a whole different episode mapped out for this week, but that all changed. And that's the nature of tackling a story that's going on right now. And right now, he's waiting for a transfer to a brand new prison, a brand new cell, and presumably a new set of rules. Because the prison he was serving time in, the North Central Unit in Calico, Arkansas, wasn't secure enough. We'll get to that. But before we do, let's talk about how Grant Hardin got there in the first place, about the calculated and callous nature of what he did and what he's actually capable of.
I think Grant Hardin is an evil man. I think he's a dangerous man. My name is Nathan Smith. I was the prosecuting attorney in Benton County, Arkansas from 2015 to the end of 2023. I prosecuted Grant Hardin for murder in 2017, and then also convicted him of rape in 2019.
Over the course of Nathan Smith's career, he's developed a pretty good radar when it comes to knowing truly bad people. What makes Grant Hardin so bad, to Nathan Smith anyway, begins 8 years ago in rural Arkansas in the small community of Gateway.
In 2017, there was a gentleman named Mr. James Appleton who lived in the Gateway area.
On February 23rd, 2017, James Appleton is 59 years old and an employee of the Gateway Water Department. In the late afternoon, he's driving along Gan Ridge Road.
He had been on the phone with someone that day. It made some statement that he had to pull over or pull off the road or something to that effect.
James is on the phone with his brother-in-law, Andrew, and he's pulled over on the shoulder when a white car pulls up behind him.
The evidence shows that at that time, Grant Hardin was behind him. Grant pulls up beside him, and Grant has his windows rolled down, and Mr. Appleton also had his driver's side window rolled down. Grant shot him and killed him on the roadside and sped away. As he left, a man crested the hill and saw him leaving.
That man is John Bray. And according to court documents, John is driving home from work when he comes up behind Hardin, who's in his car, and he waves John through. When he's questioned by police about who it was that waved him through, John was pretty clear. It was Grant Hardin, he said, and he'd known Grant his whole life.
And so Mr. Bray saw him leaving, and 911 was called, and Mr. Bray was able to identify for the police that Mr. Hardin, he had seen him leaving the scene. We later learned that after shooting and killing Mr. Appleton, Mr. Hardin went home, got into a different vehicle, and went to dinner that night with his wife and daughter. And he came back when he was coming back to his residence after eating dinner that evening, went through a roadblock or something like that, and was apprehended by police and arrested. And so he was prosecuted for murder in the first degree.
The evidence is stacked pretty high against Hardin, so he takes a plea. First-degree murder and 30 years in prison. And while it's not up to prosecutors to find motive in the case, Nathan Smith never finds one that makes sense. And he still hasn't. Is there any indication or motive behind why Grant Hardin killed Mr. Appleton?
The only thing I ever knew was there were certain theories about it, that potentially they had been in an argument over something that happened in City Hall, or there was some other issue that had come up, but nothing ever convinced me to my satisfaction. Knowing what I know now, I just think that Grant is, I do think he's a sociopath, and I certainly don't think Mr. Appleton did anything that in his mind certainly ever would have justified any kind of response like this from Mr. Hardin. So I want to make that clear. But I never knew anything that would, qualify as a motive in the case. I didn't know why he did it. We had a very strong case that he did it, but I couldn't with any degree of confidence say I know why he killed Mr. Appleton.
The 2017 murder of James Appleton is an enigma for investigators. There's no clear motive. And equally baffling is that Grant Hardin, the guy who actually pulled the trigger, is at one point the one responsible for keeping law and order in Gateway, Arkansas. He was the chief of police.
The first time I met Grant Hardin was sometime, obviously before the murder case, end of 2015 or sometime in 2016. I probably met him when he became the chief of police in Gateway. As the elected prosecuting attorney for Benton County, obviously I dealt with all of the police chiefs and their departments and how we prosecuted their cases and things like that. My first memory of Grant Hardin is I met him. He came to a chiefs of police meeting. So I met him there, and I think he called me one other time when he was the chief in Gateway. He did work for significant police departments, right, that have multiple officers. Fayetteville's a large department. Huntsville's a department with many officers. They're going to have detectives and police and patrol policemen and things like that. So they're functional, put together departments. I think he also worked for Eureka Springs. He had trouble in each of those departments to one degree or another.
His police work isn't limited to Gateway, and his crimes aren't limited to murder. Nearly 20 years before he kills James Appleton, Grant commits a sexual assault. Prosecutors only learn of that crime when he's headed to prison for 30 years in the Appleton murder.
When he was being processed into prison, they do a standard DNA testing. And so they drew a sample from him, ran it against a known database of crimes, and his DNA came up as a match for a rape of a school teacher that had been a cold case from 1997 in Rogers. And so then we came about for the prosecution of the rape.
Like the Appleton case, motive is difficult to pin down. Grant Hardin chooses his victims at random. No rhyme, no reason, and no motive.
It's unclear how he knew her, but she did not know him to the best of her recollection. And we don't know how he learned that she was at the school that day. It seems unlikely to me that if you look at the evidence of that case, that he just so happened to walk into the school with a ski mask that day. I think he had to have known something about her habits or been following her or something of the sort. What is concerning about Grant is not only the violence of his crimes, because they're both horrifically violent and they have awful effects on the victims. You then have a man who between 1997 and 2017 lived for 20 years with that compartmentalized within himself. And I'm not going to say that Grant Hardin's the only person who can live with a dark secret, but I don't know too many others who hold themselves out as law enforcement officers. I'm going to protect and serve. I'm going to do all these things. And so I think you've got a level of deviousness and deceit that is extremely troubling. Look, I mean, I am speculating, but to me, it represents that he is a sociopath. Grant Hardin is a very concerning person to me because of the seeming randomness and the arbitrary nature of his crimes.
By now, we can see the picture, and you can choose your word. It's callous or evil, or even for some, he's the devil. Anyone on the run, capable of sexual assault and murder at random, is terrifying. Nathan Smith understands what it means to him to have a violent offender like Grant Hardin on the loose.
I wouldn't say my concerns are zero, right? I mean, you've always got to be aware, especially if, I spent 16 years, putting people in jail and prison. So there are a lot of people who would probably not like that too much.
On Memorial Day weekend 2025, when Grant Hardin walks out of a prison in a makeshift uniform, it sends the community of Calico into a panic. They are understandably on edge.
I've got my 9 on me at all times.
That's Megan James, speaking to News Nation the day after Hardin's escape.
In the house, outside the house, and yesterday when I went into my garden, I was packing and my dad was packing,
So you're not really worried about your specific safety?
No, I'm worried about my neighbors. I've got an old neighbor. She's about 80, 90, widow, and I'm worried about her more than anything.
Here's Rand Champion, spokesman for the Arkansas Department of Corrections, speaking to the media at the time Hardin escaped.
Obviously, as time goes on and somebody's on foot, they can cover a lot more ground. And so just making sure, looking at possible, roads, possible, following streams, following whatever maneuvers people would take. We're not going to rule anything out at this point, obviously, because all it takes is one vehicle to hop in and you can be anywhere.
Grant Hardin's escape somehow slips past everybody. The Department of Corrections says it was a prison employee who they believe unknowingly opened the gate for Hardin, which is what gets us to the second part of this story. When a man walks out of prison unnoticed, what's the process of tracking him down?
My first thought with this is there's spur-of-the-moment escapes, and that doesn't look like what this is.
That's Michael Cantrell.
Because he took time to fashion apparently what looked like a uniform from the DOC there. I went and took a look at that. That's not the first time that's happened.
For 30 years, Michael worked in prisons, state and federal. He's been an officer, a warden, an administrator. And while he didn't work for the Arkansas Department of Corrections, he did spend years in Missouri State Prisons, a short drive from Calico and the North Central Unit. He spends most of his time now as a consultant and a trainer with corrections facilities across the country. Seems like the right person to call. So when a convicted killer makes a run for it, what's the plan? And how is it that a prison employee opens a gate for an inmate without realizing?
You have to be on your game working those control centers. And you've got 14 phones, and you're answering calls, and the radio's going, and you're checking everybody that walks by. And it's a tough job. You got to have a good guy or gal up there that can multitask, that can do 12 things, because it's really easy just to push the button, slide the door, and somebody walks out.
Look, corrections officers have a tough job. And the crux of that job, to keep inmates in, often depends on what's known as the count. And it's just what it sounds like. It's a literal head count to make sure no one is missing.
They stand up, they face the door. We have a count that we can actually walk through with what we call a bed book, which has their picture, their name, and their ID number. And they'll hold up their card. That's a once in a while count. That doesn't happen all the time. But to have them face the door so I can see them, I know they're alive, I know they're living, breathing human flesh, 1. And then I go to the next cell, 2. And that's literally how it's done. And then each unit calls into control center and they add it all up. And then we know how many inmates are in that prison.
So let's say the count is done and you're missing one. Or let's say that, you know, Grant Hardin was allegedly in the kitchen, working on the kitchen crew, when they realize that they're missing and he's gone. What's the next first step for the prison staff?
Letting everybody know that we have a possible escape, and then containment. Wherever the inmates are at that point, they need to go back to their cells, they need to go to their work area, and then we're going to start an emergency count. And we're going to count again while other things are going on. You're going to start placing people on perimeter. You're going to send people out to start searching areas. You're going to have people go to the area he was supposed to work and start conducting searches. We may call local law enforcement immediately, said, hey, can you help us with the perimeter? We're doing an internal escape. But as soon as we realize that this isn't, we've done a couple of counts, we can't find them, well, they're outside the fence. We've got to broaden this quickly, because if you take too much time, they're traveling, they're stealing cars, they're getting in, thumbing a ride. It doesn't take very long to get 2 or 3 hours away.
When the Department of Corrections realizes Grant Hardin is gone, the combination of speed, resources, and communication becomes pivotal. And the search for Hardin has extensive resources. The FBI, the U.S. Marshals, even the Border Patrol joins the search. Here's Rand Champion again, of the Arkansas Department of Corrections.
One of the nice things in the Department of Corrections, we have a very robust canine search team, and those are being utilized as much as we can. Drones are being utilized, aircraft. One of the hindrances we have had the last few days, you guys know, is we've had a lot of rain. It's been very wet, and rain hinders those type of searches. With our track dogs, the rain can affect, them being able to pick up that track.
There's 2 different types of dogs out there. There's tracking dogs, and tracking dogs are good for short distance for something that's fresh, because they follow, when you step on the grass, you crush a piece of grass, gases escape, okay? And those dogs can follow that track. The other one, which is the bloodhounds, are trailing dogs. And when you walk along every day, you're losing skin rafts off your body, and those skin rafts float with the wind. And bloodhounds follow skin rafts. With a bloodhound, we can actually use a scent article. And so the first thing I would do is, if it's a lost child even, hey, can I go get the pillowcase off of Bobby's bed? And then I'll get that and give it to my dog, let him scent off of it, and then he will stay with that scent throughout all the other scents that are in the woods and follow that one scent. A tracking dog can't follow a trail the same way. Now, they're more dedicated to where people have walked, but once you you get 20 people out in the woods and it crushes that trail. So it depends on what kind of dog you've got, but you got to find that starting area or that starting point, and then you trust the dog.
Oftentimes, escaped convicts like Hardin have nothing to lose. It's what makes them especially dangerous to anybody who may encounter them. Escapees don't want to go back to prison, and a lot of times they want to go down swinging.
His history was he was a law enforcement officer. He held a certain status in the community. And when all this happened, that had to have been ripped away from him. And so here you've got this person he lost everything ego-wise or, who he was. And now he's out there and he's desperate. Things aren't going the way he wanted. So you're looking at a fairly desperate guy here, in my opinion. What does he have to live for? He's older. He's lost, everything. And now he's got people hunting him. He's going to start getting desperate if he's hid out somewhere. And the terrifying thing about that is this guy apparently doesn't care to kill people or rape people. Yeah. So when you combine that with desperation, I hate to see what he might do. I would expect that there's somebody waiting for him out there. I really do, because he spent the time to plan this. right? This wasn't a spur of the moment. I just think he probably had to have, okay, once I get out, this is what I need. And unfortunately, there's always somebody willing to help.
Here's Nathan Smith again, the former prosecutor in Benton County, Arkansas.
I just don't know what his thinking would be. I think the only thing we know about Grant is that he doesn't think like a normal person. He didn't act like a normal murderer, in my opinion, like most murderers that you run across.
The Arkansas Department of Corrections won't say if anybody helped Hardin get out intentionally.
We're not ruling out anything at this point. That's part of that investigation and making sure that we have all those questions answered.
Any indication that he's had help since getting out?
Again, we're looking into that as well. We can't comment on that at this time.
I hope with this kind of time that somebody's got him out of the area and we get to pick him up nicely when he doesn't expect it. But if he's hid out somewhere, it's going to come to a conclusion sometime soon, because you just can't maintain it.
Michael Cantrell is right. Hardin can't maintain it.
We are beginning tonight with breaking news. The massive manhunt is over. Grant Hardin, an escaped convicted murderer and former police chief, has been captured.
On June 6th, 2025, after being on the run for more than 2 weeks, Grant Hardin's sprint towards freedom comes to an end. He isn't found hours away in a neighboring county or state. Grant Hardin is found less than 2 miles from the door that he walked out of. After tracking dogs hit on his scent, they led authorities to an area known as Moccasin Creek. In the photos taken shortly after his capture, his hands are bound, and he's wearing dirty clothes and a baseball cap. The questions of how a murderer managed to escape and then spent 2 weeks within a 2-mile radius, they're likely coming. And they should.
We never want to be, we call it the funny papers. We don't ever want to be in the funny papers, because the only time anybody pays attention to prison is when something goes wrong. That prison has probably saved the lives of a dozen inmates this year from overdoses or attempted suicides or whatever. There ain't no news coverage on that. One guy gets out, and now this is nationwide news coverage. Granted, it's an interesting deal to have a sheriff, who's now on the other side of the deal, so it makes it newsworthy. But we hate it when we have to do that, because we're judged on one thing. And so they're looking through all of their policies. They're looking through training.
The Arkansas Department of Corrections says that Grant Hardin is moving. He'll be transferred to the Varner unit. It's a supermax facility with more than 1,500 inmates, increased security, and houses death row. And as he moves in, and hopefully away, Nathan Smith, the man who put Hardin behind bars originally, is still trying to make sense of it all.
I was shocked. I could not believe it happened. It's totally shocking. My first reaction was I just hate it for the victims and their families, because they have a right to take the justice system at its word, that the sentences that are imposed mean what they say. I can imagine they're upset, and they have every right to be.
If you liked this episode, tell us about it. If you didn't like this episode, you can tell us that too. And you can find us on TikTok and Instagram at deviant.podcast. Until next time, thanks for listening. Deviant is executive produced by Clark Goldband, Dan Zamatovich, and me, Andrew Iden. Clark is our story editor at Booker. Thanks to Michael Cantrell and Nathan Smith for their time and expertise. The show is written and produced by me and Dan, with original scoring by Shuvo Sir. Sales, marketing, and distribution support comes from our partners at Gemini 13. Deviant is a production of Cold Open Media.